where you get the terminology often comes from how angels are described in Hebrew, and they're usually called angels, or they might be called seraphim or cherubim, but some of the others aren't named. They're just described as angels or described as a term, when actually in reality they are an order of angels that people don't really connect to. Obviously, you've got the Ophanim and the Chaos and all of those. Now there is the sort of external perspective of the throne of God and the Merkabah relating to all this, but there is the internal that is operating in us. So the Merkabah is at the core of our being and represents the identity of God in us, which brings about the focus of spirit, soul, and body in union with Father, Son, and Spirit in the core of our being. And actually, it's probably more important to get that than it is to understand, the canopy of angels around the throne of God and all the four living creatures and all of that, which is very interesting. And they're obviously, it's obviously mentioned in Revelation and in other places. And there are, a canopy of angels, and they do have functions raising up from the throne of God, all the way up to sort of the weird ones, the chaos, which are the living creatures, which are not necessarily humanoid, but are living. It gets all pretty weird. Some of it is, okay, does it really matter what all that is about? Because God will give us insight when we need it, when we encounter it, or do we need to understand it? And therefore, when I first started to hear about the canopy of angels and the different, the 10,000 times 10,000 angels and the myriad of angels and all of that, what are they all about? And it seemed to be just like, whoa, this is all a little bit more than I can take in. And actually, that's what God is like, from his majesty and the throne of God and all of that. Is just like, it's supposed to be awesome. It's supposed to be in somewhat a mystery, and it's supposed to make us in awe of the amazing things that are around the throne of God. But it's also supposed to be part of how we can then engage with the angelic realm ourselves in our own sonship. But when I get to the throne of God, I just want to fall on my face. I just want to honor and be in awe of and totally yield and surrender to it. There's many different levels of revelation towards each one. So the four living creatures, which are connected, and obviously Ezekiel described a four-headed being, the cherubic nature of man being four-headed, reflecting the four living creatures, which were reflecting the order of Melchizedek. So do I literally have a head of an ox and an eagle and a man? No, I don't. I mean, I have a face of a man. But do I have a cherubic nature, which was how God designed us to function in the order of Melchizedek as a priest, a king, an oracle, and a legislator? Yes. And so there are aspects of who I am that are eagle-like in figurative terms. I don't soar around in the sky, but I carry legislative governmental authority in terms of my identity. I am an oracle, so I have characteristics of the ox that are reflected in me being a voice of God when I begin to speak his oracles from his heart. There's the king, the government, and the priest. So you have my nature as a royal priest and an oracle and legend. Now that's associated with the four living creatures and the cherubic nature and the cherub themselves having those characteristics. I don't totally need to understand it all and all the symbolism, because it is quite weird, to embrace it. I embrace my identity within the order of Melchizedek, and I've engaged the four faces of God, and I've stood in each face, and I've stood within the name of God, which is representative of my authority and my power of attorney in his name, to use my identity as a son to speak his heart, his intention, his purpose, to create reality around my life. So I sort of understand how it relates to those aspects. I don't think we need to understand how it totally relates to the throne of God and the glory and majesty of God. That's supposed to be awe-inspiring mystery, and I don't think we need to understand it fully. But where I engage with the 12 layers of angels, or whatever, the different layers of angels are, and the canopy of angels, is how does that relate to how they can function in helping me in my sonship? So I did engage each of the canopies, and I went in to see, could I get engaged with the angelic realm and understand their function related to me rather than their function related to God? Because if I'm seated on a throne, which I am, and we all are, seated in heavenly places, then that canopy comes around me when I'm seated on my throne in that position of identity. So they're designed also to help me in my sonship identity in ruling and reigning in that position. So I began to engage the different angelic beings to begin to see, was there something I needed to know that would help me in my sonship? And therefore I related to the angelic canopy. I also began to engage with the court of angels and participate by sharing there, which then drew angels to support and encourage and help, because they are ministering spirits for those who are inheritors of salvation. Do I understand all of the terminology and all of their function related to God's throne and God's glory? No, but I do have some insight into how they relate to us and our throne and where we're seated and our identity, because that's our glory. Our glory is our identity, and creation will be set free into the freedom of the glory of the children of God, us living in our full identity in sonship. So there is aspects of this that are related to us to reflect and help us come into that identity. Now, do these angelic beings have multiple functions and multiple titles, perhaps, that some people relate to them in different ways, in different names within their function? And I think that may be where some of the confusion comes in that they may well have different names. Who are the 12 ambassadors of the ages? Who are the 12 ambassadors? What order of angels are they? Or are they separate orders of angels? Who are the court of judges? There are different names. Who are the 24 elders? There's sort of all sorts of questions that we could ask that can be seeming like, wow, this is, I need to know an awful lot of stuff here. But I don't think we really do to function everyday life. I think there's more to discover. And I think in different ways, people describe it differently as they relate to it in their life where they are on their journey. Which may well be different. So, just because people talk about it differently, they're talking about it through their perspective of their engagement with it, not necessarily as a definition of what it is globally for everybody and for all time. It's almost sort of, have I engaged with the cherubim? Yes. The seraphim? Yes. The Ophanim, the Elohim, the Ben Elohim, to a degree, yes. And they have different names in different positions or different functions. So you could say that the 12 chancellors or high chancellors, because there are many other chancellors, and we can also function as chancellors. I was given by wisdom a seal and a staff that had a seal and a sort of seal around my neck, which was a chancellor's role, and I've engaged the chancellor's court, and I've functioned at the bench there to facilitate sort of scrolls and mandates and things being released or accepted and different things, now I'm not really a detail person, so what were the others there look like? I wasn't really that sort of taken with what they looked like. I was more interested in what they were doing, how they were functioning, so I could learn to function. I wouldn't look like them. Now, each one of those chancellors could have been from a different order of angels, for all I know, and therefore, how I related to them there may be very different to how I would relate to them in another type of experience. So it can be quite confusing, I think, because it's not just set in stone. It's a very fluid, flexible, living dynamic within the realms of heaven. And their roles may be different in different situations. The angel that sits behind my throne, I don't know what order of angel that is. Although I have a suspicion it might be one of the Ben Elohim. I don't know exactly. God didn't tell me, and I wasn't that curious to find out. So, what does all that mean? It's more to do with, rather than an intellectual exercise for knowledge or a quest for knowledge, it's more, how do they relate to my journey and where I am on my journey, so I can cooperate with them for the sort of growth that I need to have in maturity. That's how I perceive all of these things. It's all to do with my ascending in levels of maturity, rather than a fixed, rigid thing that then would apply to everybody. Because my engagement with the cherubim or the seraphim, I have engaged with the seraphim. They were engaging with me when I was on the altar, and I've engaged with the seven spirits of God. Well, are they separate creatures? Well, they seem to be very different from anything else I've experienced. So my view is, yes, they are seven created beings. What? To reflect the fullness of the spirit, and some people would say, well, they're just aspects of one spirit. Well, they may well be reflecting aspects of one spirit, but actually, when I engaged them, they were individual personalities, beings that were reflecting that aspect in my growth in sonship, because that's what they were revealing to me, with the spirit of wisdom and knowledge and understanding and all of the seven. And the spirit of the fear of the Lord was the one who engaged my scroll and took me into the judgment seat. So, but all of it, from my perspective, is been not an intellectual quest for knowledge or understanding of it, but more of a, when I come across these things in my journey and in my encounters, then I learn to cooperate with them for what they're doing. And I totally agree. It can be very confusing if we're trying to understand all the different names and different things that people are called these different things, and try and almost put it into a very fixed, rigid format, which I don't think it is or is designed to be. If you enjoy these videos, would you please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe? It really does help. Thank you very much.